I'm at Ellinwood, Kansas, and it's a town about 10 miles to the east of Great Bend, Kansas, on the Arkansas River, the Great Bend of the Arkansas River. And it's another old Kansas town. Originally was built in the late 1880s, or so they say. You can be the judge of that, but the amazing thing here is they still have a tour that goes underground and shows what is purported to have been really an underground city in the late 1800s while people were going along the Santa Fe Trail. Now we'll contrast that with the Mudflood point of view, but it's really great because we get underneath to see all the different buildings, and I'm going to show you these buildings. You'll have to forgive the wind in Kansas. It's ever present and sometimes throws the microphone off, but you can see on the top of this building it says 1887, and as always they're always putting dates on the buildings, so it's like, hi, right here we're 1887. I want you to know we were built in 1887. Well, I can tell you this basement looks ancient when you actually calculate how long ago it's said to have been built, which is at this point 120, about 130, 40 years, right around in there. And we're going to take a look at it. You can see Ellinwood Underground tours right there, and this building is on the State of Kansas Register of Historic Places. This is in downtown. It looks much like a lot of the downtowns on the Great Plains, where the buildings were said to have been built in the late 1800s. And we're also going to go in this building. But underneath these sidewalks, which once again are vaulted sidewalks, and were built sometime either right prior to 1900 or it said 1920, although there are zero pictures of the construction of these sidewalks. And where that's more amazing is when you see what we're standing on right now, because these manhole covers are actually over a probably 10, 12 feet deep hole. We're just right above it on top of a box here. And underneath are tunnels and walkways. And you can see on this one, it still has holes going down. And we'll look up through that after a while. And these slabs go right up to the buildings. And you can see they're at an angle. Of course, that'll make water flow off. But it also makes the front of these buildings be uniform and show exactly no lower than that. So you can't see anything that's below. But we're going to see below. And we're going also to see below in the Wolf Hotel, because these tunnels not only go underneath these buildings and have a complete, what now is called a basement, but many would think that it was originally a first floor. And we can see so much of it. I don't know anyone that's gone in one of these lower areas and dug yet. And we're getting ready to go there. I just want to preface this so when we're down there, you can remember where we are, because there are tunnels that go across the street to that hotel and then underneath that sidewalk. As we go below, I want you to be able to hear what is commonly said, or the reasons for these things. So I'll not only let them talk, but I'll try to interject other points of view or other things that I think about in regards to the walls and the things that are down there. But really, you can look at what you see and try to figure out, by looking at it with some critical thinking, what the date is that those stones were put in place, those limestones that are down below. Because, you know, the 1960s weren't that long ago. Most of the things that are built around here were built well before that and not that dated. And those stones down there, which would have always been covered and sheltered from the weather, really look ancient.
You can leave it open.
Now right away you notice when you come down here that the floors, which is the ceiling from this vantage point, look relatively new. The wood doesn't look worn or old at all, but yet supposedly built in the 1800s. But contrast that with the rock on the walls that just looks ancient. And right there is a window and a door and another window. And they're going to say that was for ventilation and for a door to come in the downstairs. But that is the same exact pattern all over the country and all over the world for all the buildings down below like this.
Our foundation walls all the way down Main Street are this sort of pinkish colored limestone. And by the color of the stone, we think it was quarried up around La Crosse, Kansas. So it was hauled in about 60 miles. From street level up, all of our buildings were made out of Ellinwood brick. And then all this wood you see up here was probably hauled in from the Rocky Mountains. If you look at how long and straight and beautiful the wood is, of course you know right away the trees did not grow in Kansas anywhere. When the Teamsters got down to Santa Fe, they'd sell off their trade goods and then they'd hitch 2 wagons together, load them full of lumber, and that way they had a product they could sell on their way back to Missouri. We used to have a window up here, and then down on the front wall there were 2 windows, one on each side of the door. The windows were for ventilation. They would have had a coal burning stove going down here in the wintertime to keep it warm, and they would have always had oil burning lanterns hanging around the room, so they needed to have some air movement down here. Notice the water well over here in the corner. When the Germans got here, they realized they'd been lied to. It does get cold in Kansas, so put the well down in the basement, it won't freeze. And the other advantage is that the aquifer was about 10 feet below us in those days, so it was easy to get down to the water. Just about everything in this room is original. Now this was the front door, so this is where the public would have entered. We're going to go through. There are 2 thresholds, so please watch your step, and I'll have you step into the back side of the tunnel, please. 2 thresholds.
Well, the sidewalks right above us.
Yeah.
That's how you get out, because we have got to escape.
How do you get out?
And these things. These lift up, right?
Yeah, they used to.
They don't anymore?
They don't anymore. They're welded shut.
And this is a manhole cover probably, right?
Yeah,
So the rain comes down through there.
a little bit. Get little puddles, but nothing serious. We're under the sidewalk here. So this tunnel went that direction for 2 blocks. It looked just the same over on the other side of the street. The tunnels were divided down the middle by these brick walls. And you notice there are doors all the way down. This side of the tunnel used to have wooden partitions that created these kind of small lockable rooms. And this is where the merchants would store their coal. And we didn't have wood to burn in Kansas, and coal was expensive, so they'd have a load brought over. They'd pry up the wooden sidewalk, dump the coal down here, and then nail the sidewalk back down. In 1920, the city put in concrete sidewalks, but they were still using the coal bins, so they put the manholes in so they could drop the coal through the sidewalks.
Okay, that's good.
And then in the 70s, when the city filled in the tunnels and they put down this sidewalk, Adriana got him to save the manholes. So those are 1920 manholes in the 1970 sidewalk above the 1870s tunnel. On the other side of the wall is where the guys would have walked up and down the street. Originally there were wooden sidewalks on that side, so if it did get wet down here, you wouldn't be walking in the mud. The light from the shops would shine through the windows so you could see where you were going. And you might have noticed that that side's kind of narrow. My theory is that they did that on purpose. You always have to remember there were 11 bars down here. That way the guys could stay upright as they were going up and down the street out here.
Interestingly, the story of pouring coal down through wooden sidewalks that have been pried up and then reattached doesn't hold weight when I show you a picture from the horse and buggy days with sidewalks that are completely already constructed of concrete and without any manhole covers or any other areas to pour coal down to be seen whatsoever. If you take a look at this picture, you can see that the box made from stone walls is already there at horse and buggy era, and on top, just like a tabletop, a thick lid, is concrete poured all along. But if you notice very closely, there are no so-called manhole covers or even any openings to pour anything down in there. And if you look at the concrete on the outside of the box, because there's been concrete put on the outside of the rock wall, you can see it's very worn already. This construction is something that has already been there for a long time, already constructed like that, and just doesn't make any sense whatsoever in the current narrative of what happened. You can see it's also one material. It's not a half wood and half another substance at all. It's completely the same. I have another picture coming up that's going to show you that. So what really was the purpose of these tunnels? Because in these sidewalks there are no manhole covers. So the notion that they would pour coal down manhole covers when they didn't exist and the sidewalks are already there, but obviously well after these tunnels are constructed, really brings to the forefront the mystery of what this is. And right away you notice in this room is an extremely old window. A wooden window that they say goes out and went out to a window well that was originally, again, for ventilation. But when you look at old pictures, you cannot find any window well where you can see that construction for that point of view whatsoever. In a mudflood scenario, these would have originally been the first floors. And some people actually think that these were ancient cities that were completely destroyed, and the brick buildings were built on top of this after the fact. And it's interesting, on the top of those walls you can see the brick, and you'll notice the ceilings are lower down here. It's not very high, but as I've talked about in other videos, those floors were lowered, which made the first floor ceilings be extremely high.
Money to wash your clothes for them when they were down here too. He actually had a contract with Santa Fe to do their laundry when the trains were stopped here. So this would have been a busy place. Originally there were probably about 10 of these tin tubs down here. In 1905 is when the city put up our water tank out there, and that's when plumbing came into the buildings. So that's when the claw-footed tubs and the porcelain sinks would have arrived. So that's this side of the street. What we'll do is head out the way we came in.
And this window is so dated in comparison to the floors that are up above. And here's an old red brick sitting on that essentially windowsill, but those stones just look ancient, and that's contrasted with the bricks that sit on top. Now, up on the first floor, the ceilings are tremendously high, as I mentioned, and those ceilings are that high, really, because the floor used to be higher. So the floor was lowered to be even with the street, and that way you're not in a mud flood scenario where the floor is up 4 feet, although you'll see plenty of stairs that go up to buildings on a street like these towns have. But there's the brick right there that was put on top, so it's possible that the stones were cut down and then the floors lowered, because that lumber right above doesn't look old at all in comparison to those windows and in comparison to what you see down here in the walls. And naturally there's going to be a story that goes along with the idea that these were just basements, and that's what this is. This is a tour to hear the entire story, and they put props and everything down there to be able to have a tour, but
Yeah, sure.
you have to use your judgment.
This job so you could get promoted and not have to do it anymore.
Another incredible thing is that there are absolutely no pictures of any of these holes being dug, or any of these sidewalks being made, or any of these tunnels being constructed, these brick walls. And look at the age of the brick and the stone just by looking at it. And does that stone and that brick look like it's just 2 times 70 years? 70 years is not that long ago. And what would have ever made them construct every single town like this?
Hotel's not gonna rent you a room. I says, what do you mean they're not gonna rent me a room? This gentleman said,
You want us to go through this?
Yeah,
Walk
mhm.
through here? Oh, okay. We did not, we went into the visiting there at the Himalayas.
Once you start researching, you realize that every single town is exactly like this, whereas only a few of them have underground tours. They're actually all like this. All the sidewalks are built the same way, and amazingly, they were all done and all this concrete poured and everything done at a time when they supposedly didn't have any method other than a wheelbarrow. It's said, even on this tour, that the sidewalks were put in by the city in 1920, but you'll see in this picture of Ellinwood when it was horse and buggy, as you can see in the picture, that the sidewalks are completely already poured, and they would be done in the same manner as a lid over these tunnels. So this goes way, way back, and these were all poured at a time with some means that's better than a wheelbarrow.
you know, it's historic stuff. Little bit of colored light in. So the most.
It's like a disco party going on.
And again, the wind can cause some sound problems, but just bear with me on that, because the wind is always, or most of the time, blowing in Kansas.
Go ahead and come on into the tunnelway.
Was that bed?
Nothing. It was completely empty. This is the only thing that was here. Now, you notice the minute you get in here, it feels completely different than it did just a couple steps away. And that's because we're underneath the sidewalk. In the summertime, people think it would be cool down here, but because we're under the sidewalk, it's not. It heats it up. If it's 100 out there, it's probably 110 down here. Because the sun beating on it is just almost like an oven. And then in the wintertime, once it's cold. So that part isn't too good about it. Go ahead and follow me in here and see our first storefront.
So that totally negates the notion of having these underground areas, because the temperature's better.
Now, people think that somebody built built this on. This is how it was built to begin with. This is all part of the hotel that we're in now. And this is how they built. We were settled by Bavarian Germans, and they built this way in Bavaria. 3 usable floors. And they even made it so they could have stores underground. So we didn't build this. This is how the hotel was built to begin with. We were going to leave it.
So that's the narrative of how these buildings ended up like this. They say the Bavarians built them like this. The only thing is, it's all over the world, all over every town. So apparently the Bavarians here and another group somewhere else, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Those stones are just ancient looking. And to build like that, a wall underneath that's seemingly ancient with red brick on top is just incredible. And you have to remember there are absolutely no pictures of any sidewalks being built, holes being dug, walls being built, or anything of the sort anywhere around the nation at a time when they said construction is underway everywhere in the late 1800s. So a lot of things have been redone in this room, but you can see under a mudflood scenario, when a building is buried right to the mid part of the windows, this is what it looks like looking from the inside out. And of course, many will say those are window wells. But when you look at the ancient stones in the basement with red brick on top, and all over every town in all over the world, and how they have to actually put steel across there and concrete right at a place where you can't really seal it, it's just extremely odd. So this is just a small look at what lies beneath our feet in towns all across America, the world, and small towns such as this. It's really amazing. You'll never look at things the same way again when you know what is below our feet and what the possibilities are for these towns. Hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the next video.